I was sitting on my porch in Tennessee when my daughter called and said, "Dad, we've decided something, Mom and Dad-in-law will be moving into your place. It'll be better for everyone." At first, I thought she was joking. The words rolled out of her mouth so casually, like she was talking about the weather. It'll be better for everyone. Everyone except me. I remember the way the porch creaked beneath my chair as I leaned forward, the evening sun melting into the horizon. The smell of pine trees and distant rain hung in the air. My hand trembled slightly, not from age this time, but from something colder, disbelief. She said it like it was a small favor, something ordinary. Like I hadn't spent 40 years building that house from the ground up. Like it wasn't the same porch where I'd rocked her to sleep after her mother died, whispering that everything was going to be okay. I could still hear her as a little girl, barefoot on these same wooden steps, calling out, "Daddy, look what I made." Her drawings used to hang on the fridge, right beneath a photo of her mother smiling with that quiet pride only a wife gives a man who built her a home with his bare hands. Now, that same daughter, my only child, was asking to hand it all over. Not to me, not even to her, but to her husband's parents. There was a long pause on the line. I could hear her waiting for my response. But I couldn't speak. My throat felt tight, and for the first time in years, the house felt too big. Too quiet. In that moment, something inside me broke, not loud, not sharp. Just a slow, steady fracture that spread deep. The home I built for her mother's memory had just been turned into a plan I never agreed to. Before I tell you what happened next, if you believe family should never trade love for convenience, subscribe to this channel. I was born and raised right here in Tennessee, small town, big skies, and neighbors who wave whether they know your name or not. I built my life here one plank, one nail, one promise at a time. When I was 25, I met Martha. She wasn't from around here, but she carried sunshine wherever she went. She had that rare kind of laugh that could melt through the hardest day. Together, we built everything, our love, our dreams, and eventually, this house on the edge of the woods. I was a carpenter back then. Not rich, not poor, just steady. I remember the day I finished building the porch, Martha came out with a glass of sweet tea and said, "You're not building a house, Peter. You're building a home." She was right. That porch became our world, where we watched rainstorms, where she knitted, where our daughter, Anna, took her first steps. When Martha passed away 15 years ago, it nearly hollowed me out. Cancer. Quick and cruel. For months, the house was too quiet. Her scent still lingered in the hallway, her slippers still beside the bed. I thought about selling the place back then, but I couldn't. Every beam, every nail had her fingerprints on it. Leaving would have felt like erasing her. Anna was my reason to keep going. She was in college at the time, studying business. I remember driving 5 hours every weekend just to see her. She was all I had left, the living proof of the love Martha and I built together. When she graduated, she brought home a man named Eric. I'll admit, at first, I liked him well enough. Polite, confident, the kind of man who always smiled with his teeth. He shook my hand too firmly and called me sir even when I told him not to. But I saw how Anna looked at him, so I kept my doubts to myself. They got married 2 years later. I built them a dining table as a wedding gift, solid oak, polished till it gleamed. I remember Anna hugging me, whispering, "No one builds like you, Dad." That table ended up in their fancy house in Nashville. After the wedding, visits grew less frequent. Calls became shorter. She always sounded busy, always promising, "Soon, Dad, we'll come by soon." I tried not to take it personally. Kids grow up. Lives change. That's what I told myself. Still, every Sunday I'd sit on that same porch, rocking gently, waiting. The phone would buzz sometimes, a text, maybe a picture, but never the sound of her voice. Then one spring, out of nowhere, she called and said they'd be coming to visit. I spent the whole week fixing the place up. Cleaned the gutters, mowed the lawn, even polished the porch rail. I hadn't seen her in months. When she arrived, I barely recognized her. Not that she'd changed much physically, just something in her eyes. Softer in some ways, harder in others. Eric stayed glued to his phone most of the time, pacing the yard, taking calls that sounded too important for family weekends. Still, I made the best of it. We ate on the porch. The air smelled of lilac and rain. For a brief moment, it felt like the old days, until Eric started asking about the property. "How big is the lot, again?" he said, scrolling through his phone. "You could probably build a whole second house here." I chuckled. "One's plenty for me." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, but think about it, sir. A guest house, maybe. Something more modern." I just sipped my tea and said, "This house doesn't need modern, son. It's got memories." Anna laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. But I saw it, the look they exchanged. The kind of look people give when they've already made plans behind your back. That night, after they went to bed, I walked around the property, barefoot, feeling the earth under my feet. The magnolia tree Martha planted was blooming again. Its petals smelled exactly like the summer we built this home together. I stood there for a long time, staring at the house through the dark, its windows glowing softly like watchful eyes. "This is all I have left of you, Martha," I whispered. "And I'll be damned if anyone takes it from me." The next morning, they left early. Anna hugged me, quick, distracted. Eric gave me a polite nod. "We'll talk soon," he said, sliding his sunglasses on. He said it like a promise, but it felt like a warning. The house felt heavier after they drove off. I could still hear the echo of their tires on the gravel road long after the sound had faded. For the next few weeks, I tried to shake off the unease. I went fishing, visited the diner in town, even played cards with old Harold from the hardware store. But something about that visit lingered, the tone in Eric's voice, the way Anna wouldn't meet my eyes. I told myself I was being paranoid. But in my gut, I knew. Peace doesn't last forever. Especially when greed starts whispering in familiar voices. 2 weeks later, Anna called again. "Dad," she said cheerfully, "you'll never guess who's moving to Tennessee. Eric's parents, Glenn and Patricia. Isn't that wonderful? They've always loved the countryside, and they found a place just a few towns over." Her voice was too bright. "Practiced." I smiled, though something in me tightened. "That's nice, sweetheart. I didn't know they were planning that." "Oh, it's all last minute," she said quickly. "They just want to be closer to family." Closer to family. I could have asked which family she meant, but I didn't. Sometimes silence says more than a question ever could. They showed up a few weeks later, unannounced. I heard the sound of tires crunching over my gravel drive and the chirp of a car alarm before I saw them. Eric stepped out first, tall and smug as ever, followed by his parents, Patricia, dressed like she was attending a church luncheon, and Glenn, wearing a polo shirt a size too small, belly pushing against the fabric. "Peter," Patricia said, smiling like we'd known each other our whole lives. "What a lovely home you have here." Her voice dripped sugar, but her eyes scanned the porch, the paint, the windows, the way a buyer studies a house, not a guest admiring it. I shook her hand. "Thank you, ma'am. Built it myself, long ago." "Oh, how quaint," she said, emphasizing the word like it was a compliment and an insult at once. Glenn joined in, clapping me on the shoulder a bit too hard. "Big place for one man. Must get lonely out here." I smiled faintly. "It's peaceful." He laughed. Sure. But you know, houses like this, they're meant for families. For growth. For change." Eric grinned at his father, and I caught the look that passed between them, quick, but heavy. A shared secret. We all sat on the porch after that. Patricia brought up every possible subject except me, their social club, their upcoming investment property in Nashville, Eric's career trajectory. Anna tried to keep the peace, but her laughter felt forced. She barely looked at me, except when her mother-in-law said something out of line, and then she'd give me that small, pleading glance. Please don't react, Dad. I didn't. I just sat there, rocking slowly, listening. Such potential out here, Glenn said, gesturing toward the fields. A guest house over there, maybe a garden pavilion. You could easily fit 2, maybe even 3 families. Patricia chimed in, imagine, holidays all together, children running around, grandparents sharing the same roof. So much more efficient than everyone paying separate mortgages. Efficient, I repeated softly, tasting the word like something sour. Eric smiled, swirling his drink. It's something we've talked about, actually. Consolidating family resources, you know. My parents are selling their property. We thought maybe, well, your house has the space. My heart thudded once, hard. I looked at him slowly. My house? He chuckled, waving a hand. No, I just mean, if you ever needed help maintaining it, it could benefit all of us to live here, I finished. His grin faltered for just a second. Then he laughed again. It's just an idea, sir. We'd all pitch in. Family helping family. Patricia smiled thinly. It really would make things simpler for everyone, dear. I said nothing. I just let the words hang there, thick and heavy as the Tennessee heat. That night, after they'd all gone to bed, I sat alone on the porch again. The crickets sang, the air smelled of damp wood, and the rocking chair groaned softly beneath me. It had been a long time since I'd felt this uneasy in my own home. I stared out at the magnolia tree, the one Martha planted the year Anna was born. Its branches stretched wide under the moonlight, strong and unmoving. This was supposed to be her mother's place, I murmured. Not theirs. I thought about Martha's voice, the way she used to say, some people love you for who you are. Others, for what you own. The trick is knowing the difference. That line hit differently now. The next morning, I overheard something I wasn't supposed to. I was coming down the hallway when I heard Patricia and Glenn talking in the living room. Patricia's voice was low but sharp. He's stubborn, but he's getting old. Once Anna convinces him, he'll give in. Just act patient. Glenn grunted. He's sentimental. That'll work in our favor. We tell him it's what family does, share. He won't say no to his daughter. Patricia laughed softly. Then once the paperwork settled, we can finally modernize this place. Tear down that ugly shed. Maybe even sell part of the land to those developers. I froze. They didn't know I was standing just outside the doorway. I waited, listening. Every word hit like a nail hammered into my chest. Anna's footsteps joined theirs, followed by her uneasy voice. I don't know if he'll agree. This house means a lot to him. Patricia's tone changed, cold, precise. Then make him see reason, darling. He's your father. He'll listen to you. The conversation ended there. I stepped back quietly, heart pounding, before they could see me. I went back out to the porch, sat down, and stared at the horizon. They were already planning their lives around my home. My daughter, my only child, had brought the wolves right to my door. But as I sat there, the evening wind rustling the magnolia leaves, something strange happened. I didn't feel fear. Not anymore. I felt clarity. You can't teach people like them a lesson with words. They don't hear them. But you can make them listen, if you let the truth speak for itself. And that's when the plan began forming. Quietly. Slowly. Like a storm gathering over calm water. 2 weeks passed after that visit. The house fell quiet again, but it wasn't the peaceful kind of silence I used to love. It was the kind that hums with something waiting to happen. Then one morning, my phone rang. Anna's name lit up the screen. "Dad," she said softly, "we're coming by later. Eric's parents too. There's something we'd like to discuss." Her voice was polite. Careful. The kind people use when they've already made a decision and are only calling to inform you. I knew, even before they arrived, that this wasn't just another visit. By noon, their car pulled up again, that same polished black SUV that seemed too proud for my gravel driveway. They stepped out together, all smiles, carrying folders and coffee cups. "Dad!" Anna called brightly, like everything was fine. Patricia waved a manicured hand. "Peter, we brought some papers for you to look over. Just something simple." My stomach sank. I led them inside. They moved through my living room like they already owned it, pointing things out. "Oh, this old furniture could use replacing, imagine what we could do with this space." I didn't say a word. I just let them talk. When we sat down at the table, Eric cleared his throat, pulling a stack of documents from his briefcase. "Now, Dad," he began, trying to sound friendly, "this is just a little legal adjustment, for tax and inheritance purposes. It'll make things easier for everyone in the long run." He slid the papers toward me. I didn't touch them right away. I just looked at him, the way you'd look at a man holding a knife while calling it a gift. Anna sat beside him, quiet. Her hands were folded neatly, but I noticed her thumb rubbing over her wedding ring again and again. Nervous. "What kind of adjustment?" I asked. Eric smiled. "Joint ownership. Just a formality, really. You keep your name on the deed, of course. We just add ours, you know, in case anything ever happens, it'll all stay in the family." Patricia jumped in, her voice syrupy sweet. "It's the sensible thing to do, Peter. No point in old paperwork slowing things down. We're family, after all." Family. I looked at Anna. "Is this what you want?" She hesitated. Just for a second. But then she nodded. "It's just to make things easier, Dad. You'll still live here. Nothing changes. Nothing changes." The words sounded rehearsed, like someone else had fed them to her. I reached out slowly, pulling the papers toward me. My name was there, right on the title line. But beneath it, in neat black print, were three others, Eric, Glenn, and Patricia. And below that, a clause written in smaller text: "Full ownership transfers to secondary parties upon primary's death or incapacitation." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I looked up, meeting Eric's eyes. "You think I don't read fine print?" He froze. Patricia laughed lightly. "Oh, Peter, it's just a precaution. You're overthinking it." I folded the papers carefully, aligning the edges. "You know what's funny?" I said quietly. "Martha used to tell me I was too trusting. I guess she was right." Anna looked like she wanted to say something, but Eric placed a hand over hers. "Sir, I promise, this is for everyone's benefit. You won't have to worry about anything." I smiled. Calm. Cold. "You're right. I won't." Then I stood up. "I'll think about it." Eric frowned. "There's really nothing to think about. It's just." I cut him off with a gentle hand. I said I'll think about it. The firmness in my tone made him sit back. They exchanged glances, confusion, maybe even frustration. They expected me to argue, to yell, to lose my temper. They didn't know silence could be more dangerous than shouting. When they left, I followed them to the door. Patricia gave me one last sweet smile. "You'll see, Peter. This is what's best for everyone." I nodded politely. "Sure thing." Anna lingered for a second. Dad, please don't be upset. Eric's just trying to make things easier for us all. For you all, I repeated softly. She blinked, not catching the correction, and hugged me quickly before heading to the car. I stood there on the porch long after the sound of their tires faded down the road. The wind picked up, stirring the magnolia branches. I looked around at the land, the house, the yard, the trees Martha planted herself, and for the first time in years, it felt fragile. Like it was under siege. Inside, I sat at the table again, unfolding the papers. I traced my name with my finger. They thought I'd sign it. They thought age meant weakness. But what they didn't understand was that this house wasn't just lumber and paint. It was my wife's memory. My daughter's childhood. My entire life carved into wood and soil. And I wasn't about to hand that over. Not to Eric. Not to his parents. Not even to the daughter I loved more than life itself. That night, I sat by the fire with a cup of black coffee, staring at the flickering light against the walls. The air smelled faintly of smoke and pine. For the first time since Martha died, I spoke to her out loud. They want your home, I said softly. They think they can take it. The flames cracked gently, and the room seemed to breathe with me. Well, I murmured, leaning back in my chair, I suppose it's time they learn something about what I built, and who they're dealing with. I folded the papers neatly, slid them into a drawer, and locked it. Then I took a deep breath and let the silence settle around me again. Not the silence of surrender, but the silence that comes before a storm. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The world was still, the kind of stillness that only comes before something changes. The air outside was cool, and the mist hung low over the magnolia trees. I sat on the porch, a cup of coffee warming my hands, thinking. All my life, I'd built things with patience, tables, porches, staircases, and I'd learned that the strongest structures are the ones no one sees being built. That was exactly how I'd handle this. Quietly. I wasn't going to confront them. Not yet. You don't warn termites before you fumigate the house. By mid-morning, I made a call to my old friend, Harold Denton, the local attorney who'd handled my wife's estate years ago. Harold was the kind of man who didn't waste words. He answered on the second ring. Peter, he said, his voice low and gravelly. It's been a while. Everything all right? I need to come by, I told him. It's about my property. He sighed softly, as though he already knew. I'll put on coffee. Harold's office sat on Main Street, sandwiched between the post office and the feed store. When I walked in, the bell above the door jingled, and he looked up from his desk. His gray hair was slicked back, and his reading glasses hung low on his nose. Let me guess, he said, motioning for me to sit. Family trouble. I nodded. You could say that. I told him everything, the visit, the papers, the joint ownership pitch. I even showed him the documents they'd left behind. He scanned the first page, whistled softly, and shook his head. They're trying to lock you out of your own home, Peter. I've seen this before, joint ownership is just a pretty way of saying transfer of control. I leaned forward. I'm not signing a damn thing. But I also don't want to start a war. He smirked. You don't have to. You just have to outthink them. What do you suggest? He reached for a blank form and began writing. Your property's still under your sole ownership, yes. I nodded. Built it before I married Martha. Good. That means we can transfer it into a living trust, one they can't touch. You remain lifetime trustee and beneficiary. When you're gone, ownership passes exactly where you decide, not where they expect it to. I smiled faintly. And if they try to manipulate me again? He slid a document across the desk. Then you let them. But this time, you record it. By the time I left Harold's office, the sun was high, glinting off the courthouse windows. I felt lighter, not because I'd forgiven them, but because I finally had a plan. I stopped at the hardware store on the way home. Picked up a small digital recorder, some fresh batteries, and a new padlock for the drawer where I'd hidden their papers. The cashier, a young man named Luke, bagged the items and smiled. "Working on a project, Mr. Langston?" I smiled back. "Something like that." That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the recorder in front of me. I pressed the red button and let it click once before speaking. "Test 1, I said softly. "Day 1. The sound of my own voice on playback startled me, calm, measured, older than I expected. It reminded me that the years had changed me, but not weakened me. Then I made another call. "Anna," I said when she picked up. "I've been thinking about what you all said. Maybe I should hear more." There was silence on the line. Then relief in her voice. "Really, Dad? That's great. I knew you'd come around." I forced a chuckle. "Well, it doesn't hurt to talk, does it?" They came the following weekend. This time, they arrived with smiles wider than before, Eric in his pressed shirt, Patricia with a casserole, Glenn holding a binder. "Peter!" Patricia exclaimed. "We're so glad you reconsidered." I welcomed them in politely, just like before. Coffee was ready, the house spotless. They thought they'd won. The recorder sat hidden under a folded napkin on the table. We talked for hours. I asked questions this time, let them feel comfortable, let them talk freely. Glenn explained how family consolidation would save taxes. Patricia went on about combining resources. Eric leaned forward, his voice calm, calculated. "It's not about taking anything from you," he said. "It's about building together. You've got the land, we've got the vision. This could be a family legacy." "A legacy," I repeated. "That's a strong word." He smiled. "Exactly. You'll still live here, of course, but legally, it makes more sense for us to have your names on it," I finished for him. He didn't realize how carefully I was leading him, every word, every nod pulling him deeper into confession. Patricia sipped her coffee. "Once the deed's updated, we could make real improvements. Maybe even tear down the old barn, get better insurance, upgrade the roof." I smiled gently. "So I sign, and the place becomes ours?" "Ours," she said sweetly, "yes." When they finally left that evening, my hands were steady as I packed the recorder away. I played back the audio that night, every word crisp and clear. Their laughter. Their greed. Their arrogance. And Anna's silence through it all. That part hurt the most. Still, I had what I needed. Proof. Over the next week, Harold and I finalized the trust documents. The deed was transferred quietly, not to Anna, not to me, but to the Martha Langston Foundation, a small nonprofit I'd set up in my wife's memory years ago. The property would remain under my care for life. Upon my passing, it would automatically belong to the local community center. If anyone tried to alter ownership before that, the trust would dissolve into state custody, locking the property permanently. Harold looked up from the final form, his pen tapping the desk. "You realize this means no one can ever own it again, right? Not even your daughter?" I nodded. "That's the point." 3 days later, Anna called again. "Dad, Eric wants to stop by and finalize things," she said. I kept my tone light. "Of course. Tell him to bring his parents. I've been doing some thinking." "Really? You're okay with it now?" I smiled. "Let's just say I'm ready to sign something." That weekend, I set the stage. The house gleamed. The porch lights were warm. I even made Martha's old pot roast recipe, the one Anna loved as a child. I wanted it to feel familiar. Safe. When they arrived, the table was already set. They looked relaxed, confident. Eric smiled, shaking my hand. I knew you'd see reason, sir. I gestured for them to sit. Reason's a fine thing, I said softly. But truth's better. They didn't understand. Not yet. Dinner was pleasant. Too pleasant. They laughed, told stories, complimented my cooking. All the while, I kept my voice calm and my eyes steady. When the plates were cleared, Eric opened his folder again. Here's the revised deed. You just need to sign right here. I took the pen. Turned it slowly in my hand. Then I smiled. I already did. Patricia blinked. You did? Yes, I said, sliding a sealed envelope across the table. But not the one you brought me. Their faces changed instantly. The laughter died. What's this? Eric asked, frowning. The truth, I said. And a copy of what happens when people mistake kindness for weakness. I stood slowly, the chair creaking behind me. Inside that envelope was a certified letter from Harold's office, confirming the new trust, the audio transcript of their recorded conversation, and a note from me. A simple line. You wanted my home. I built something stronger, a legacy that will outlive your greed. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. The silence that followed spoke louder than anything else. The next few minutes after I handed them the envelope felt like time had stopped. The house was silent, no sound but the slow tick of the clock above the mantel and the wind brushing against the porch screen. Eric was the first to move. He opened the envelope, hands already shaking, probably expecting to find a signed copy of his revised deed. What he saw instead made the color drain from his face. He pulled out the trust document, stamped and notarized, then the transcript, their words printed out in neat black ink. Patricia leaned over his shoulder, her eyes widening as she read aloud. Once the paperwork settled, we can finally modernize this place. Maybe even sell part of the land. Her voice broke on the word sell. Glenn shifted uncomfortably, glancing from me to Eric. What the hell is this? I leaned back in my chair, calm as the steady flame in the lamp beside me. That, I said, is a reminder that when you walk into a man's house with a plan, you should make sure he doesn't have one of his own. Patricia's hands trembled. You recorded us? I nodded. Every word. She turned to Anna, her tone sharp and panicked. Did you know about this? Anna shook her head, her face pale as linen. No, I didn't. Dad, what is all this? I met her eyes for the first time that night. It's protection, sweetheart. Protection from people who confuse kindness with stupidity. Eric's composure cracked. You can't do this. You had no right to record private conversations. Private? I repeated. In my own kitchen. In my own home. You handed me a pen and tried to steal everything my wife and I built. You forfeited the right to privacy the second you planned to bury me under fine print. He tried to speak again, but I raised a hand. The gesture was enough to quiet him. I slid another paper across the table, a copy of the trust deed Harold had finalized just days before. This house now belongs to the Martha Langston Foundation, I said. It's a legal trust, locked under Tennessee property law. I live here until I die, and after that, it becomes a retreat for single parents and children in need. Patricia's voice cracked. You gave it away. No, I said softly. I gave it meaning. Eric slammed his hand on the table. You're insane. You'll regret this. I smiled faintly. Maybe. But at least I'll regret it from the comfort of my own home. He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. We'll contest this. You can try, I said, standing too. But you'll find out soon enough that your signatures and your words carry more weight than mine ever needed to. He looked confused, angry, until I gestured toward the small digital recorder still sitting on the shelf. The recording, I continued, isn't just for me. It's already been duplicated, one copy with my lawyer, one stored online. If anything happens to me or this property, that evidence goes straight to the authorities. Attempted fraud. Manipulation of an elder. You could lose more than your pride. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Patricia tried to regain her composure, forcing a brittle smile. Peter, we didn't mean any harm. This is a misunderstanding. I chuckled, the sound low and bitter. Funny thing about misunderstandings, they disappear when the truth's recorded. Anna was crying now, quietly, shoulders trembling. She looked so small sitting there, not the confident woman I'd raised, but a frightened daughter trapped between loyalty and guilt. I knelt beside her, my voice softening. You made a mistake, Anna. You trusted the wrong people. But that doesn't mean you're beyond forgiveness. She whispered, I didn't think it would go this far. I just wanted everyone to get along. I nodded slowly. Getting along is one thing. Giving away your soul is another. Eric muttered something under his breath, but Glenn silenced him with a sharp glare. Patricia was still staring at the trust papers, her voice tight with disbelief. You'd rather give this land to strangers than keep it in the family? I looked her dead in the eye. Family earns trust. They don't demand it with signatures. That shut her up. They left not long after, not with angry words, not with shouting, but in stunned, brittle silence. As the door closed behind them, the air in the house felt lighter, almost as if the walls themselves could finally breathe again. I stood there for a while, listening to the rain begin to fall softly outside. The magnolia tree rustled in the wind, its white petals glinting under the porch light. That tree had weathered storms before. It would weather this one, too. I walked to the study, sat down at my desk, and wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. Today I learned that love without boundaries becomes permission for betrayal. But silence, when chosen carefully, can build walls stronger than steel. When I finished writing, I folded the page neatly and slipped it between Martha's old photo album and our marriage certificate. Her face smiled back at me from a yellowed picture, her eyes soft, timeless. I handled it, love, I whispered. Your house is safe. 2 days passed before I heard from Anna again. She showed up alone this time. No Eric, no in-laws, just her and a trembling apology. When I opened the door, she looked exhausted. Her eyes were red, her hair unkempt. She held the same envelope I'd given them, now crumpled from being clutched too tightly. Dad, she said quietly, I'm sorry. I stepped aside to let her in. We sat in silence for a while, the same table where everything had nearly been destroyed now serving as the stage for something softer, redemption. She finally spoke. Eric's furious. His parents are threatening to sue you, but their lawyer told them they don't have a case. Everything you did is airtight. I nodded. That's what happens when you try to cheat a man who builds things right the first time. She gave a small, tearful laugh. I should have known better. Mom always said you see through people. She also said people don't show their true faces until they want something. Anna nodded slowly, eyes downcast. You were right about him. About them. I thought marrying into a family like that meant security. I didn't realize it meant ownership. Her voice broke on the last word. I reached across the table and took her hand. Security doesn't come from money, Anna. It comes from peace. And peace only stays where truth lives. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she smiled faintly. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I squeezed her hand. Maybe not. But forgiveness isn't earned, it's given, because holding anger only feeds the wrong side of the story. After she left, I sat back on the porch, the storm finally easing off. The air smelled clean again, washed of deceit. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, quiet, fading, like a warning that had finally run its course. I looked out over the land, the old barn, the magnolia tree, the worn fence lines that had stood longer than most people in this town, and I felt something settle deep inside me. Not triumph. Not even satisfaction. Just calm. I'd done what needed to be done. Without shouting, without fighting. The right kind of revenge doesn't destroy. It preserves. And I had preserved everything that mattered, my home, my peace, and the truth that had held this family together once upon a time. That night, before I went to bed, I took one last walk through the house. My footsteps echoed softly on the old wooden floors. I stopped by Martha's picture in the hallway. She looked the same as she always had, that quiet smile, that light in her eyes. I kept my promise, I said. No one will ever take this from us. I turned off the lights, leaving only the porch lamp glowing through the window. Outside, the magnolia swayed gently, petals falling like white snow against the dark earth. It felt like she was there again, not in body, but in peace. I'd protected what we built. And in doing so, I'd built something else, a legacy that no one could own, only remember. In small towns like ours, word travels faster than wine through the cornfields. It didn't take long before everyone knew what had happened. At first, I didn't care much who heard. But then I realized something: I didn't need to defend myself. Truth, once revealed, does its own work. Eric and his parents, though, they didn't fare as well. Within a week, the gossip had made its way from the diner to the church pews. People whispered, pointed, shook their heads. It wasn't just about what they tried to do, it was about who they tried to do it to. Folks around here know me. They know my story, my late wife, the house I built with my own hands. They know what family means to me. So when the story broke, about the deed, the trust, the recordings, sympathy wasn't on their side. Eric's business took the first hit. A few of his local clients pulled out of contracts, not wanting to be associated with a man who tried to rob his own father-in-law. His firm, built on reputation and charm, started to crumble. Patricia and Glenn stopped showing up to church altogether. The one time I saw them in town, they turned the other way. The shine of their fake smiles had dulled. Greed doesn't wear well on people when exposed to daylight. And Anna, well, she kept her distance for a while. I understood why. Shame can weigh heavier than guilt. But she called often, sometimes just to talk, sometimes just to listen. I never pushed. I let her come back on her own time. It was about a month later when she came again, unannounced, just like before, but this time with no fear in her eyes. Only resolve. When I opened the door, she stood there holding a paint bucket and a brush. "What's this?" I asked, half smiling. She looked around the porch, then met my eyes. "You said Mom always wanted this house to stay alive. I figured it's time to give it a fresh coat." For a moment, I couldn't speak. There was something simple, almost sacred, about the gesture. So I nodded. "All right then. Let's get to work." We spent that afternoon side by side, painting the front porch. The rhythm of the brushes against the wood filled the quiet between us. Every stroke felt like an unspoken apology. At one point, she stopped and looked at the magnolia tree. "Do you ever think she'd be proud of us?" she asked softly. I smiled faintly. "She'd be proud of you for finding your way back." Anna's eyes welled up, but she kept painting. "I thought I lost everything that day. But I see now. I was just starting over." "You learned something most people never do," I said. "That love without respect is just decoration. Pretty to look at, but hollow inside." She nodded, and we kept painting in silence. By sunset, the porch gleamed like it did the day I first finished it for Martha. The air smelled of paint and springtime, and for the first time in months, I felt peace, the kind that doesn't need to be earned. A few days later, Harold called. "You'll be happy to know, he said, that the complaint Eric tried to file against you didn't even make it past the first review. The evidence you provided made their claims look ridiculous. It's over. I chuckled softly. Wasn't it over the minute they walked out of my house? Harold laughed. Probably. But now it's official. We talked for a while, mostly about the foundation. He'd helped me set up a small donation program, the first step toward turning the property into a community home one day. Local carpenters volunteered to help when the time came. It was fitting, I thought. The same hands that once built for profit would now build for purpose. After I hung up, I sat out on the porch again. Anna joined me later, bringing 2 cups of coffee. She handed me one and said, "Dad, I visited the foundation website. You really gave it all away." I smiled. "Not away, sweetheart. I gave it forward." She tilted her head. "Still, I wish I'd understood that sooner. I thought owning something made it yours." "It doesn't," I said. "It's what you're willing to lose for it that makes it real." She stared out across the yard for a long moment. The magnolia's petals were falling now, soft and white against the grass. "You think Eric ever understood that?" she asked. I shook my head. "Men like him measure life in ownership. Not in legacy." She sighed. "I loved him, you know." "I know," I said quietly. "And love isn't wrong. But sometimes it takes losing what you think you need to find what you really deserve." Over the following weeks, Anna began helping me around the property. We fixed the old fence, cleaned the attic, and even started a small vegetable garden where the shed used to stand. Every evening, we'd sit on the porch and talk about Martha, her laughter, her stubbornness, the way she'd hum while cooking. For the first time in years, the house sounded alive again. The wound that betrayal left had begun to heal, not through apology, but through presence. And though I'd never admit it out loud, I knew Martha would have smiled seeing us there together, the way it used to be before the world complicated love with contracts and greed. One night, Anna asked me something I didn't expect. "Dad, do you ever regret it?" she said. "Regret what?" "Not leaving the house to me directly. Giving it to the foundation instead." I thought for a moment, watching the fireflies blink near the magnolia tree. "No," I said finally. "Because this way, no one can ever use it again for selfish reasons. Not even by accident. It's safe, for good." She nodded slowly, understanding. Then she smiled. "I guess Mom's legacy turned out bigger than we thought." "It always was," I said. We sat there a while longer, letting the crickets fill the silence. The following Sunday, we attended church together for the first time in years. People smiled and whispered, surprised to see us side by side. During the service, Pastor Reeves spoke about forgiveness, how it's not about forgetting the hurt, but refusing to let it define the rest of your days. Anna squeezed my hand. I didn't look at her, but I squeezed back. Afterward, Patricia and Glenn were there, sitting in the back row, heads low. They didn't say a word as we passed. But I saw it in their eyes, the understanding that their schemes had turned to dust. I didn't gloat. I didn't even glance twice. I simply walked out, the way a man does when peace has already been won. That evening, I stood out on the porch again, the sun setting behind the hills. Anna was humming one of Martha's old songs as she watered the flowers. I watched her for a while, the same way I used to watch Martha, and I realized something simple but profound. Sometimes, protecting what you love doesn't mean keeping it. It means setting boundaries so strong, no one can break them again. The house glowed softly in the fading light, the magnolia tree swaying like a guardian over everything we'd rebuilt. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, I felt it, not victory, not revenge, but balance. And that, I realized, was the truest kind of justice there is. It's been 6 months since that storm passed. Some mornings, I still wake up expecting to hear Martha humming in the kitchen or Anna calling from the porch, but life has a way of reminding you that time only moves one way. Still, when the wind blows through the magnolia tree and the leaves brush the windows just right, I swear I can hear their laughter again, faint, like echoes caught between the years. The house stands just as strong as ever. The paint's fresh, the roof doesn't leak, and the porch creaks in all the familiar places. It's not perfect, but it's honest, just like the life we built here. Every week, a few volunteers from the town come by to help with the foundation work. We've turned the old barn into a storage space for donated furniture, and the back field will soon become a garden for single mothers to grow their own food. The local paper even ran a piece about it, a legacy of love and resilience, the Martha Langston Foundation. I cut the article out and framed it. It hangs by the front door now, next to our family photo, the one taken before everything changed. When I look at it, I don't see the years that broke us. I see the love that built us back. Anna comes by often. She brings her little dog now, a yappy thing that digs up my tomatoes, but I don't mind. Sometimes she just sits beside me on the porch, both of us rocking in silence, watching the sun melt behind the trees. There's peace between us now, not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that has learned to live with it. Last week, she said something that stuck with me. "Dad," she said softly, "I think I finally understand why you didn't fight them with anger." I smiled and said, "Because anger's a hammer, sweetheart. And you don't fix a cracked foundation by hitting it harder." She laughed through her tears, and I realized that was the first time I'd seen her truly smile since all of this began. Sometimes I walk the property alone at dusk, just as the sky turns gold and the world gets quiet. The magnolia tree is taller now than it's ever been, its roots deep and sure. Every time I pass it, I touch its trunk and whisper, "We made it, love." I think about how close I came to losing everything, not just the house, but the meaning behind it. And I realize now, revenge isn't about winning. It's about restoring balance. You don't always have to raise your voice to be heard. You don't have to destroy someone to teach them a lesson. Sometimes, the most powerful form of justice is simply living long enough to let the truth outlast the lie. Because truth always does. It's quiet, patient, and unshakable, like old wood that's weathered 100 storms. When I built this house, I didn't know it would one day become my battleground. But now, it's more than that. It's a testament, proof that love, when protected, becomes stronger than betrayal could ever break. I sit on the porch most evenings, watching the light fade, the fireflies blink in the grass, and the air settle into that familiar stillness. And I feel something I haven't felt in years, peace that doesn't ask questions. Martha's photo still sits on the windowsill beside me, her smile catching the glow of the setting sun. I raise my cup toward her and whisper, "It's still ours, love. It always will be." If you've ever had to stand your ground against people who mistook your kindness for weakness, if you've ever fought to protect what you built with love and honesty, subscribe to this channel. Because stories like this one remind us of something simple but true. Silence isn't surrender. Forgiveness isn't defeat. And revenge, the quiet kind, the dignified kind, is nothing more than truth, standing tall long after the noise fades away.